Chapter 1. Arrival at Hargrave Hall. Hargrave Hall stood on top of a gentle hill, surrounded by gardens and ancient trees, as if nature itself was trying to preserve its secrets under dense foliage. The estate seemed frozen in time. The wrought iron lanterns, black and white walls, the ticking clock in the hall, and the smell of old wood reminded of the past, which was in no hurry to give way to the present. An engine purred on the long gravel driveway. A woman in her 40s got out of a gray car, slender, wearing a dark green coat and a hat with a veil. Mary Hargrave nodded stiffly to the footman and headed for the massive oak door. She was followed by her daughter, Greta, with short hair, trousers, and a volume of Wilde in her hand. She looked around the facade with a slight smile. "Here's the family idyll again," she said, not hiding her irony. "It remains to wait for thunder and the corpse in the library." "Please, Greta, no theater," Mary said softly. They were already waiting for them in the house. Elizabeth Hargrave, Sir Edward's youngest daughter, always anxious, as if she had to take an exam, and her brother John, a tall, burly man with heavy eyes. Henry, a distant relative, arrived first, his suitcases lined up in the lobby, as if he planned to stay for a long time. Peter Randolph, the famous author of detective novels, stood by the fireplace and looked at the portraits on the wall. "Peter," Mary said with mild surprise, "you're not related, are you?" "Alas, no," he smiled, adjusting his glasses. "Sir Edward kindly invited me as an outsider. Apparently, he feels that the anniversary party will be intense." They laughed, but it sounded forced. That evening, at dinner, Sir Edward raised his glass. The room immediately fell silent. He looked at everyone like a general before a battle. "Thank you for coming. Family." He paused, as if tasting the word. "It's time to change something. Tomorrow morning, I will announce the new provisions of my will. Some of you will be surprised." The silence hung over the table thicker than the smoke from the fireplace. No one said a word, but their eyes crossed like swords. Even old Miss Morris, the governess, suddenly paled noticeably. And outside the window, an old ash tree creaked softly. Chapter 2. Wills and Omissions. The next morning, Hargrave Hall awoke to silence, broken only by the steady ticking of the clock in the main hall and the rustle of Miss Morris' footsteps. She was the first to go down to the kitchen, as she had been for the past 30 years, and asked for coffee in Sir Edward's office. The old man woke up early. His mornings always started the same way. Coffee, newspaper, 20 minutes of silent reading by the window, and only then, conversations. But the office was unusually busy that day. Sir Edward called the notary, Mr. Albright, who appeared with a briefcase full of papers and a stern expression on his face. By 10 in the morning, the whole family gathered in the library. "Don't they discuss such things after death?" Greta whispered, sitting down on the arm of the chair where Peter Randolph was already sitting with a notebook. "Only if you want everyone to fight each other later," he grinned. Sir Edward was standing by the fireplace. He was leaning on a cane, but there was still a stern military bearing in his bearing. He started talking without any foreplay. "I don't have to report, but I feel it would be more honest to warn. My old will is no longer valid. You all had chances to prove yourself." He looked around the room. "But I'm tired of waiting." He motioned to Mr. Albright. He took out a piece of paper and began to read out the main provisions of the new document. When it became clear that most of the estate, including the house, would now be transferred. "Greta, the faces in the room have darkened." Mary sat bolt upright in her chair. "I'm sorry, Sir Edward, but this is unexpected. Nothing more than your tacit approval of John's senseless expenses or Elizabeth's endless whims," the old man replied sharply. Henry nervously clutched the newspaper in his hands. I promised a lot of things, Edward replied dryly. And now that's it. He left the library, leaving behind a room in which there was not just resentment, but a threat. Greta was silent. Even her usual cockiness seemed to have dissolved. Well, Peter Randolph said, flipping through his notebook, it's an interesting plot for a novel. I hope it's not going to be a murder novel. He said it with a smile, but no one laughed. Chapter 3. Death Under the Ash Tree. The next morning turned out to be particularly foggy. Milky gray steam spread across the lawn in front of the house, enveloping the trees and garden, as if the estate itself was trying to hide something that should not be found. The first alarm sounded around 8. It was Miss Morris, a governess with an impeccable sense of order. She went to Sir Edward's office to serve coffee as usual, but the office was empty. He didn't spend the night in bed either. The bed remained untouched. Sir Edward, she called, coming out onto the terrace. Are you here? There was no response. After a few minutes, the anxiety turned into panic. The servants began to scour the surroundings. It was the young gardener, George, who first noticed something amiss at the foot of the old ash tree. A huge, twisted tree that had been growing in the eastern part of the garden since the estate was built. Sir Edward was lying on his back, arms outstretched, eyes fixed on the crown of a tree. The cane was lying 2 steps away. There was no fear or pain on his face, as if he had just fallen asleep. Peter Randolph, one of the first, came running to the gardener's call. He slowly approached the body, sat down next to it, and examined it without touching it. Did you call a doctor? He asked. On my way, Elizabeth replied in a trembling voice, wrapped in a blanket. Peter looked carefully at the ground around him. There were no signs of a struggle, but the grass under the body was crushed, as if he had been standing there for a while. Did he look healthy for his age? He turned to Mary. Relatively. Blood pressure, heart rate, but not so much that it's like this. Henry came up beside her, his face pale. Fell. Did he hurt himself? Peter shook his head. I'm not a doctor. But no, falling from such a height doesn't explain everything. And haven't you noticed? He pointed to the side of his pajama collar. There was a dark dot glistening faintly. A drop of blood? Or a shot? Maybe it's a bite, Greta muttered from a little distance away. Or something sharper. When Dr. Reed arrived, he confirmed that death had occurred at night, closer to 3 o'clock. My heart stopped, but the reason is unclear. There may have been an outside influence. We'll have to wait for the results of the analysis, he added dryly, zipping up his bag. The police arrived by noon. Inspector Hawkins, a man with bushy eyebrows and a voice like creaking floorboards, carefully examined the place, listened to the first testimony, and uttered a phrase that sent a chill through the skin. This is not a natural death. This is murder. Inspector Hawkins didn't like to rush things. He started with Sir Edward's office. The room was untouched, books neatly arranged alphabetically, an armchair by the window, a desk. Everything was in its place. Only a cup of half-finished coffee was cooling on the tray. Who was the last person to see Sir Edward alive? What is it? He asked everyone in the library. Mary folded her hands in her lap. I am after reading the will. He went up to his room and said he wanted to be alone. No one saw him again. Servants. No one, Miss Morris replied. He didn't call. It was unusual, of course, but I decided not to disturb. Hawkins called each of them one at a time. Mary Hargrave, did you have any disagreements with Sir Edward? He was never an easy man, but we respected each other. I raised his granddaughter after my son's death. Did the will surprise you? Let's just say I expected justice. I got a surprise. Greta, the inheritance is yours now. It got you. Joy. The last thing I wanted was his money, Inspector. He thought all his life that I could be controlled. I assure you, if I could, I would give it up. Hawkins narrowed his eyes. And now it's too late to refuse. Henry, I thought he would help. We're a family. He promised, in letters. He was trembling. And you were left with nothing? Almost. I owe the bank. It's complicated. Hawkins wrote something down in his notebook. Where were you between 1 a.m. and 3? In my room. Read. Who can confirm? No one. But I couldn't. John Hargrave. He was ashamed of me. All my life. I was a disappointment. And now I'm just angry. Don't make a motive out of it. Elizabeth, I have insomnia. That night, I heard someone walking on the stairs. But I don't know who. They were light steps. Male or female. Rather feminine. Gentle, careful. Hawkins raised an eyebrow. Thank you. Finally, he walked over to Peter Randolph, who had been watching in silence all this time. And you, Mr. Ryder, what do you think? I think you're not looking for someone who benefited, but someone who was on the verge. Murders are rarely committed out of calculation, more often out of desperation. The inspector nodded. And yet, each of them had a reason. And maybe someone had the opportunity. Chapter 5. Footsteps in the dark. Hargrave Hall seemed to have died out. The servants were tiptoeing. The house was silent, but inside it was seething. Everyone felt like they were being targeted. Inspector Hawkins took over Sir Edward's office, and Peter Randolph, unofficially but with equal zeal, began his own investigation. The murderer is among us, he said, flipping through his notebook. The only question is which one of them talks too much, or, conversely, is silent. The next day, George, the gardener, approached Hawkins with a tremor in his voice. I'm sorry, sir. I found this when I was mowing the grass by the south wall. He held out a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. Syringe. Thin, almost surgical. There is a tiny drop of dried blood on the needle. Hawkins called Dr. Reed. Injection. A very small dose. If it's a poison, it's selective, rare. I'll send it to the lab. Peter found out about it from the inspector half an hour later. Do you think this is the murder weapon? He asked. So far, it's a hypothesis. But the syringe was hidden in the bushes where no one walks. This is not forgotten. It was thrown away. Meanwhile, in the house, Greta noticed that her mother was talking less often and watching more. She went into her room. You know something, don't you, Mom? Mary didn't answer right away. I didn't want you to find out. But your grandfather, he blackmailed some of us. More precisely, he threatened. With what? Secrets. Old ones. One of them does not concern only our family. Please stay out of this. John started drinking. He appeared at dinner with red eyes and spoke abruptly. Everyone's looking at me like I killed him. I wish I could, but I didn't. Let it be clear. Henry, on the other hand, had disappeared. No one had seen him for several hours. When they found him, he was in an old barn, looking for something. I wanted to find the will. Suddenly, there is something else. He said he left a copy. Hawkins began to watch him more closely. And in the library, Peter accidentally bumped into Miss Morris. He smiled. 30 years in this house. You know more than anyone. Maybe, but silence is a habit, especially when it saves lives. And she passed by without looking back. Chapter 6. Shadows of the Past. The fog lifted, but the house remained under a heavy dome of alarm. Inspector Hawkins received the results of the laboratory. Traces of digitoxin, a potent poison of plant origin, were found on the needle. It can be extracted from foxglove, a plant that, as it turned out, was grown in the greenhouse of Hargrave Hall. Who took care of the greenhouse? What is it? He asked, gathering everyone in the conservatory. George, mostly, Miss Morris replied. But plants are Miss Elizabeth's passion. She knows each bud by name. Elizabeth flushed. This is monstrous. Do you really think that I don't think anything yet. I'm just asking questions, the inspector said calmly. That evening, Peter Randolph found an old newspaper dated 1954 in the archive at home. The article was short but sufficient. The tragedy in Lakeshire, the suspected death of Lieutenant Thomas Hargrave. According to rumors, the investigation has not been completed. The culprit was never found. Thomas was Edward's younger brother. Peter showed the clipping to Miss Morris. Did you know? I was working as a maid then. Thomas died in the lake. And Edward was silent, although he knew who was with him that night. Who? She stared at the fireplace for a long time, as if she could see through it. Henry. He was a teenager then. Thomas said something about their mother, about the will. He was found dead an hour later. It feels like a repetition. Peter squeezed the clipping. This detail could change everything. At the same time, Hawkins was already talking to Henry. Were you close to Sir Edward? Not really. He helped with money, but from a height. As if I had to pay with gratitude. Are you facing bankruptcy? Henry looked away. Yes. Were you in the greenhouse a week before your death? Maybe. I used to read there sometimes. It's warm in there. Are you familiar with this? Hawkins showed a photo of digitoxin. Henry paled. There was a similar plant in a magazine that I was looking at, but I didn't touch it. At that moment, George came running, looking pale. I'm sorry, sir, you asked me to let you know. If anyone tries to get into the office at night. Who? It's Miss Mary today. With a key. I was looking for something in Sir Edward's desk. The inspector stood up. It looks like the time for polite questions is running out. Chapter 7. The letter that should not have been. Inspector Hawkins immediately went to the office. Mary Hargrave was sitting in an armchair by the window. On his lap is Sir Edward's old leather briefcase, unbuttoned. Are you looking for something specific? He began smoothly. Mary didn't even flinch. Yes. I wanted to find the letter. Edward wrote it to me last week. He promised to tell me something that can save my soul, as he put it. Where is it? It's gone. Or he didn't leave it. Or someone has already found it. The inspector nodded and examined the table. There, in the box, under the double bottom, he noticed a strange break in the wood. He pulled it carefully and took out a folded piece of paper. The letter isn't signed, but the handwriting is unmistakably Edward's. You know what happened to Thomas. I've kept your secret, but the years don't erase the guilt. I intend to tell Greta everything. She should know that she inherits not only the property, but also the curse of our family name. Hawkins straightened up, so he was going to break the silence. Did you want to stop it? I wanted to understand what he meant. I didn't kill him, Inspector. So far, everyone says it. Meanwhile, Peter Randolph sneaked into the greenhouse. He remembered Miss Morris's words. Everything starts with plants. He found a pharmacy bottle in one of the drawers under the clay pots. The sticker on it was scraped off, but a piece of text remained. Digitalis perp. Digitalis, the active substance of digitoxin. He took the find to the inspector. I found it where there should be only flower soil. Someone hid it on purpose. Hawkins examined the vial and said, This is no longer an accident. This is preparation. When he returned to the house, he saw John and Henry arguing loudly in the hall. If you hadn't been pouring money into the casino, Dad wouldn't have cut us out of the will. John shouted. And you? He knew about your stock dealings. You had a good reason. Henry replied. Yes, you're with Thomas then. Then they both fell silent. It's too loud, too late. Repeat that. Hawkins asked, appearing next to him. They were silent. And that was the night someone tried to set fire to the box in the fireplace where Sir Edward's old letters were kept. The servant, Mr. Carson, smelled the smoke and prevented the fire. Among the barely smoldering wreckage is a piece of an envelope with the inscription. A copy of the will. Open in case of death. Chapter 8. The Will and the Lie. The next morning, everyone gathered in the library. The scraps of the burnt envelope gave Hawkins a reason to look for a complete copy. And he found it. In a safe, behind a painting in an office disguised as a panel. The document was signed a month ago. Everything was different in him. The main heir became Peter Randolph. Shock hung in the air. Even he himself was amazed. That's impossible. I did not know. I would never accept it. I'm sorry, he muttered. Sir Edward seemed to trust you more than he trusted his own blood, Hawkins said dryly. Mary shook her head. He wanted someone, honest and outsider, to keep the estate. He didn't let us ruin him. Then why has Greta already received the main share in another will? Elizabeth asked. Because someone deliberately destroyed that copy, Peter replied. But I didn't have time. The letter survived. So this murder wasn't just revenge. This was a planned elimination to prevent the entry into force of the new will. Hawkins called John in for a second interrogation. Where were you the night before Sir Edward's death? I had a few drinks and read. Who can confirm? I do not know. Maybe it was Mrs. Langdon. She said she heard footsteps. Did you know about the will? No. If I had known, I would. He broke off. Yes? Nothing. It's crazy. Peter is an outsider. The inspector looked at him carefully. Did you know how to get the poison? No. And your father? He was a chemist by training, and he still has some books. Meanwhile, Henry tried to escape. He wasn't in his room at midnight. The servant reported that he saw him leave through the kitchen and head towards the road. They caught up with him 2 miles from the estate. He didn't resist. I didn't kill, he whispered, but I knew who could. Who? Hawkins asked. I'll tell you. But not here. Chapter 9. Confession at midnight. In the small room of the old manor, lit by a dim lamp, Henry sat across from Inspector Hawkins. His hands were shaking, and his voice was barely audible. It was John, he whispered. He couldn't stand that his grandfather changed his will. He was afraid of losing everything. Are you sure? Hawkins asked. Yes. On the night of the murder, I saw him come out of his office with a rush and take something in his hand. Something small. Poison. It looks like it. Peter Randolph listened in silence, his hands clenched into fists. In the library, on the other hand, Greta and Mary were arguing, hurling accusations at each other. If John is guilty, why are you defending him so much? Greta asked. Because he's my brother, Mary replied, her voice shaking. The inspector decided to set up an ambush. That night, he ordered the servants not to leave the manor, and he hid in the shadows by the study. John showed up at exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, as if responding to a call. He quickly went to the safe, trying to be unnoticed. Hawkins stepped out of the shadows. John, your game is over. John lowered his head, without resistance. Why? Because the truth always comes out. Chapter 10. The last chapter. The truth is in the light. Inspector Hawkins was staring intently at John Hargrave, who was sitting in an armchair with his hands clasped in his lap. The night was cold, but the tension in the room seemed on the verge of exploding. John, Hawkins began, now that you've been caught, tell the truth. Why did you kill Sir Edward? His eyes were filled with a mixture of bitterness, fatigue, and something deeply depressed. I didn't mean to kill, he said softly. But he killed me first. Not directly, of course. He killed my dream, my hope, my life. He took a deep breath. My father always put him above me. Edward. He was perfect in the eyes of the family, and I'm a loser who only spends money and causes disappointment. When he announced that he would transfer his fortune to an outsider, Peter, I realized that I had become a complete nobody to the family. I tried to talk to him, to persuade him to change his will. He refused. Then I found the poison in the greenhouse. That was my desperation. I didn't want him to die. I wanted to make him afraid, to make it clear that I have the power. But things got out of hand. John continued. When I saw him coming to me with a letter where he was going to tell Greta the truth, I was afraid that she would take control of everything. I decided to act. How exactly? What is it? The inspector asked. I sneaked in at night with a syringe. He didn't even have time to realize what had happened. He was quiet, calm. He didn't resist. Why not tell me right away? Hawkins asked. Fear. The fear of losing my family. The fear of admitting that I had become someone I hated being. Peter Randolph stood nearby, listening bitterly. So you're an heir who came to inherit through blood and death, he said softly. Greta approached John, looking him straight in the eye. You ruined everything that could have saved our family. Maybe, John agreed. But otherwise I would have disappeared forever, never understanding what it means to be a part of this family. Inspector Hawkins has completed his report. The fate of the Hargrave family is now in the hands of the law, but the memory of the Sirs and their mistakes is a lesson for all of us. The house was empty, but even when the darkness receded, there was a heaviness in our hearts, not only from loss, but also from broken hopes. And the riddles of the past seemed to have finally found their answer.